Has you ever found yourself, staring at your bank account, feeling that squeeze, that sense that you're just sort of stuck,
Hmm.
trading precious hours for dollars and the numbers barely budge? Maybe you're even in a job that just doesn't light you up. Maybe brings on a little anxiety about the future.
That feeling is incredibly common. It really is. It's like that treadmill effect, especially when the standard financial advice seems, well, designed for a timeline most of us don't really want to wait for.
Exactly. And that feeling, that reality, is the jumping off point for our deep dive today. We're plunging into the insights from Grant Sabatier's book, Financial Freedom, which really challenges that conventional wisdom head on.
Yeah, our mission in this deep dive is to cut through the noise. We're extracting the absolute most important nuggets and honestly some surprising details from Grant's journey and research.
Right.
The goal is really to show you how you might significantly accelerate your path to financial independence and gain more time, more control, and ultimately, yeah, more freedom in your life.
And this isn't about complex financial jargon, is it? It's about practical steps and, crucially, a massive shift in how you think about money and time.
That's key.
Grant's core realization, born from his own experience, was this. Money is freedom. Okay, yes, but time. Time is more valuable than money.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, waiting around for job charming to solve all your problems isn't the winning strategy.
No, definitely not. And that realization for Grant, it came from a pretty rough place, actually.
Let's unpack that. The source material starts with Grant hitting, well, rock bottom. Financially speaking, just $2.26 in his bank account.
Wow.
He was in a job he genuinely disliked, and he did the math. In 6 months, he'd traded 1,400 hours of his life for a mere $15,500 after taxes.
Oof.
And instead of saving anything, he'd actually racked up $12,000 in credit card debt.
Yeah, that experience wasn't just financially painful. The book says it led to debilitating anxiety for him. He looked at the standard blueprint, work for 40 plus years, save a little, hope you can retire eventually, and thought, no way, this just isn't the life I want.
He wanted control.
He wanted control over his income and his time much sooner. He wanted work that felt meaningful, not just a way to, tread water.
And this is where the book really takes aim at that traditional retirement advice you hear everywhere, the just save 5–10% of your income. Grant pinpoints 3 major problems with this approach, especially if your goal is speed.
Okay.
First, it simply doesn't generate wealth quickly enough for most people. Second, you spend the most energetic, vital years of your life trading all your time just to earn money. And third, and perhaps most critically, this advice is simply not designed for anyone who wants to achieve financial freedom in less than, say, 40 years.
Right. The example they use of Travis saving 5% annually is pretty stark. Even with a hypothetical 7% annual growth rate, after 20 years, he'd only have around $142,000. Which is not enough, not nearly enough to fund decades of living expenses, especially when you factor in inflation.
Right. It highlights that if you want to accelerate, relying solely on saving a small percentage just isn't the engine you need. It pushes you towards that crucial mindset shift. Money isn't necessarily limited if you focus on making more of it.
Yeah, the source points out that money is, well, a human construct. And within a capitalist society, the opportunities to create or earn it are, at least in theory, infinite.
Interesting way to frame it.
So once you question the slow, traditional path, the very next step is clarity. What does financial freedom mean specifically for you? And that requires defining your number.
Your number. Okay. This is basically the amount of money you need to have invested, pretty conservatively, to cover your annual expenses indefinitely using what they call a safe withdrawal rate.
Exactly. The common rule of thumb is 25 to 30 times your expected annual expenses.
And where does that 25x come from?
That 25x multiplier comes from landmark research like the Trinity study. It suggests that withdrawing around 3–4% of your investment portfolio annually, adjusted for inflation, gives you a very high probability, historically, like over 90%, that your money will last for 30 years or more.
Got it. And what's fascinating here is that your number isn't set in stone, right? The book really stresses that you're not the same person you were years ago, and you won't be the same person in the future. Your values, your lifestyle, your goals, they evolve.
Absolutely. So you need to revisit and recalculate your number at least once a year. It's a direct reflection of the lifestyle you want.
Just for example.
If you're aiming for, say, $50,000 in annual expenses, like Grant initially did, your number is $1.25 million. But if you dream of living somewhere with a much higher cost of living, maybe New York City, where average annual expenses might hit $117,500.
Then your number?
Then your number skyrockets to nearly $2.94 million based on that same 4% withdrawal rate. Big difference.
Wow. That difference alone is incredibly motivating to think about location or lifestyle choices. The source also mentions, though, that while the multiplier covers ongoing expenses, you might need to add some extra buffer for large, one-time future goals, like buying a home after you're financially independent.
Good point. Right. So you have your destination, your number. Now, where exactly are you starting from?
And that brings us to what the source calls the single most important number to track in personal finance: your net worth. It's simple math. Your assets minus your liabilities. Everything you own minus everything you owe. The source strongly advises tracking this number religiously, maybe even daily or at least weekly.
Tracking it can be confronting initially, I think, especially if your debt is high. But you really can't navigate to a new destination without knowing your starting point. And debt is the most obvious thing that drags down your net worth.
Right. The example of Julie in the book shows this clearly. She has substantial assets, but even larger liabilities, resulting in a net worth that's only a fraction of her assets.
And this immediately raises a critical question for a lot of people. Should you pay down debt first, or should you invest?
The big question.
The source gives a pretty clear framework based on simple math and compounding. If the interest rate on your debt is higher than any realistic return you could expect from investing, then paying down that debt is your highest guaranteed return. Compounding works against you viciously with high-interest debt.
Think about credit card debt. Often 15%, 20%, sometimes even higher APRs.
Yeah.
You are almost certainly not going to consistently earn returns that high in the market. Paying off a 22% interest credit card is like getting a guaranteed 22% return on your money. The source says you should always pay credit cards in full monthly if you can. If you have any debt over, say, 15%, tackle that before investing. But if your debt has a lower interest rate, like some student loans or mortgages under maybe 6-7%, the equation changes.
Right. Grant kept his 2.625% mortgage because he was confident he could earn a higher return investing that money elsewhere, plus he got tax deductions on the mortgage interest. So the decision really comes down to the numbers and making sure compounding is working for you, not just on your debt.
Okay, makes sense. So you know your destination, your number, and your starting point, net worth. How do you close that gap quickly?
This is maybe the core idea. The single most powerful lever, more important than your income level or even investment returns initially, is your savings rate.
Or savings rate.
Yeah.
So the percentage of your income you are saving and investing.
Exactly. And the impact this has on the timeline to financial independence is just massive.
Massive.
Well, the source uses charts to illustrate this dramatically. We can't show you, obviously, but picture this. The difference in time to reach, let's say, $1.25 million by saving 50% of your income compared to just 10%. It isn't just 5 times faster.
Because of compounding.
Exactly. It collapses the timeline dramatically. Now, saving 50% of even a modest $50,000 income with a 7% growth rate still takes around 25 years on its own. But combine a high savings rate with increasing your income, that's where you really change the game.
And the source suggests taking that big, maybe overwhelming target number and breaking it down.
Yeah, figure out what saving your target rate means on a yearly, monthly, weekly, even daily basis. Seeing those smaller, achievable targets like how much you need to save per day to hit your goal in 10 years versus 20 years makes the seemingly impossible feel concrete and actionable.
Makes it feel like a manageable process, not just a distant dream.
Exactly. And saving more early leverages, compounding like nothing else, every single dollar you save today has decades potentially to multiply itself.
Which brings us neatly to the income side. Because while saving is crucial, there's a limit to how much you can realistically cut.
For sure.
That's why the source puts a huge emphasis on income acceleration, strategically finding ways to make more money beyond just your primary job.
This is what the book calls the enterprise mindset. It's about constantly looking for every ethical, legal opportunity to increase your income and focusing on maximizing the money you earn per minute or per hour.
Okay, so starting with the job. Your full-time job is definitely the foundation. It provides that steady income stream you can invest from. But the source encourages you to see it as more than just a salary. Think about the value, the benefits, they often say. That's worth an extra 20-50% of your pay. Plus paid learning opportunities, the connections you make.
And maybe most importantly, within that job context, you must negotiate your salary. Seriously. The source lays out a clear process. Research your market value, understand your specific value to your company, pick the right timing, and then make a confident ask.
They share an anecdote, don't they?
Yeah, about someone getting an $80,000 raise just by applying these principles. And even small raises today compound into massive wealth differences over decades. It's huge.
Seeking flexibility is another thing, like remote work or flexible hours. That could be really valuable.
Definitely. It frees up time you'd otherwise spend commuting or, just being present but not productive. Time you can then redirect towards side hustles or personal development.
Okay, side hustles. These are huge in the book.
Huge. They're framed as basically becoming an entrepreneur but with significantly lower financial risk than starting a full-blown business from scratch.
And the benefits.
Well, side hustles diversify your income, which provides security if your main job disappears. They offer incredible learning opportunities. And here's the key. You can often invest 100% of that extra income, automatically supercharging your savings rate.
The source is full of examples, right? Grant started building simple websites for $500 and scaled up. Domain flipping. Matt, a graphic designer, built a dog walking business on the side that brought in $200,000 a year on top of his $55K job.
Incredible. Or Brandon, who created a translation app that passively earned him $500 a month for years. Tyler started a recruiting firm as a side hustle that now generates $5K to $15 a month easily.
So it shows the range from active service-based work to more passive income streams.
Exactly. Passive income, as defined in the book, is money that requires minimal ongoing time commitment once it's established, things like investments, rental income, or selling online products like courses.
They mention people creating courses on really niche topics like orchid care or guitar repair and living off that passive income.
Yeah, and rental income from real estate is also specifically highlighted as one of the most sustainable long-term passive income sources.
But also worth noting the time trade-off, isn't it?
Definitely. While actively trading hours for dollars in a side hustle, like driving for a rideshare, is a starting point, building something scalable or passive gives you much more control over your time in the long run compared to just working more hours for someone else.
The source talks about dedicating specific blocks of time or just leveraging those in-between moments for these income-generating activities.
Right. Okay, so once you're saving more and earning more, where does that money go? That's where smart investing comes in as the next major accelerator.
Investing, the ultimate form of passive income, according to the book.
Pretty much. It's how your money works for you without you having to trade your time. And the book pushes back against the idea that you need to be some kind of financial guru. The industry often makes it sound way more complicated than it needs to be.
So what are the core concepts?
The core investment concepts from the source are pretty straightforward. Minimize risk, relative to your time horizon, of course. Minimize fees, minimize taxes, both on contributions and withdrawals. And over time, maximize returns.
Let's break that down. Asset allocation.
That's how you split your money between, say, stocks and bonds. It depends heavily on your timeline. If you're 10 or more years away from needing the money, the source suggests you could potentially be 100% in stocks for maximum growth potential.
And closer to needing it.
As you get closer to needing the funds, you gradually add bonds for stability, less volatility.
Fees. You mentioned minimizing fees.
Yes. Fees are like a silent killer of returns. Even tiny differences, like 0.1% annually, compound negatively over decades and cost you a shocking amount of money. You need to be vigilant about all layers of fees, account fees, fund fees, any load fees when you buy or sell. Ask about everything.
And taxes.
Tax optimization is another crucial strategy. The source details tax-advantaged accounts. You've got your traditional 401k or IRA where you get a tax break now but pay taxes in retirement.
Versus Roth.
Versus Roth 401k or IRA where you pay taxes now but withdrawals in retirement are completely tax-free. The choice depends on whether you think you'll be in a higher or lower tax bracket in the future compared to now.
And for side hustles.
They also highlight SEP or solo 401k accounts specifically for side hustle income, which can provide significant tax benefits today. Really worth looking into if you have self-employment income.
So what's the recommended stock strategy? Is it complicated?
Refreshingly simple, actually. Stick to low-cost index funds that track the total U.S. stock market or maybe the S&P 500, plus an international stock fund for diversification.
Not picking individual stocks.
They strongly advise against putting large amounts of money into individual stocks. Keep that to a small, maybe fund percentage, if at all, perhaps 5% of your portfolio max. It's just too risky for the core of your wealth building.
Inconsistency.
Non-negotiable. Automate your investments so the money moves before you even miss it. But also challenge yourself to increase your savings rate regularly. Even adding just 1% more every month or quarter can make a huge difference over time, especially when you're starting out.
Okay, so stocks are key. But beyond the stock market, real estate is presented as another incredibly powerful tool for building wealth rapidly.
Definitely. Historically, real estate has been less volatile than stocks and offers two main ways to build wealth: appreciation, where the property value goes up, and cash flow from rental income.
And leverage.
And huge leverage, meaning you can use a relatively small amount of your own money, the down payment, plus a mortgage from the bank to control a much larger appreciating asset. Plus, there are significant tax benefits through deductions like depreciation and mortgage interest.
But doesn't buying property tie you down? That's a common fear.
The source challenges that. They discuss strategies like house hacking, renting out rooms in your primary residence, which can drastically reduce or even eliminate your biggest expense: housing.
So you live cheaper and build equity.
Exactly. They also mention you can do things like cash out refinances later to access equity you've built without selling.
And getting the mortgage itself?
Shopping around is absolutely essential. Rates can vary by over 2% between lenders sometimes. That literally saves you hundreds of thousands of dollars over a 30-year loan term. You can often get initial quotes without a hard credit pull, so do your homework.
15-year versus 30.
Your 15-year mortgage saves massive amounts of interest if the payments are manageable for you. But a 30-year offers lower payments and more flexibility. Depends on your situation.
Their down payment strategy is interesting too. Not always 20%.
Right. Instead of putting down 20% or more, putting down only the minimum required, like 3% on certain loans, can actually be smarter if you can invest that extra cash elsewhere and confidently earn a higher return than your mortgage rate.
But be careful.
Oh, absolutely. The key is not to spend more than, say, 30% of your net worth on a down payment or leave yourself completely cash poor after buying. Grant's purchase of a Chicago property during a market downturn with a lower down payment is a great example. It allowed him to ride the wave of appreciation he would have missed if he'd waited to save a larger down payment.
And real estate is scalable.
It is. You can buy multiple properties over time to increase both cash flow and build equity faster. And managing a few properties, say 5 or fewer, can often be done with less than 5 hours a week. Or you can just outsource the management entirely if you prefer.
Okay, let's shift gears to the other side of the coin from earning. Spending. This is where the mindset shift gets really personal, I think.
It really does. The source makes a powerful argument here. Every single purchase you make is a trade-off for time and for freedom.
How so?
It's not just the dollar amount leaving your account today. It's the time you had to spend earning that money in the first place. And critically, the future potential value that money could have grown into through compounding if you had invested it instead.
This is where that $60,000 car example comes in.
Exactly. The source calculates that due to lost compounding potential at a pretty standard 7% return over 30 years, that single purchase could cost you nearly $500,000 in future wealth.
$500,000. Wow.
Right.
$486,989 to be exact in their calculation.
That's the true cost. And the source provides formulas to help you calculate this for your spending. The pre-tax cost, item price divided by 1 minus your tax rate, and the hours of your life traded, the after-tax price divided by your real hourly rate.
Let's quickly use that coffee example again, a $3 coffee. If your blended tax rate is, say, 25%, the pre-tax cost is $3 divided by 0.75, which is $4. You had to earn $4 to bring home $3 to buy that coffee. And if your real after-tax hourly rate is $20, that $3 coffee cost you about 9 minutes of your life. $3 divided by $20 is 15 hours. That definitely changes how you look at spending, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It forces you to question purchases. How much genuine happiness or value will this really add? Is it worth the money? Yes, but also the time I traded for it and the future freedom I'm sacrificing.
That simple advice to just wait 30 days for any significant purchase seems incredibly effective in light of that.
Totally. And instead of agonizing over every tiny little expense with granular budgeting, which the source argues can actually foster a scarcity mindset,
Right.
Focus your energy on the high-impact areas.
The big three.
The big three, where most Americans spend the majority of their income: housing, transportation, and food. These often account for 60% or more of spendable income. Get these right, and the small stuff matters less.
So strategies in these areas have the biggest leverage. For housing, maybe house sitting, house hacking, like Anita in the book, who saved 90% on rent despite a $175K salary just by living with roommates.
Or strategically choosing a cheaper location to live. Or for transportation. Can you avoid owning a car entirely? If not, buy the cheapest reliable used car you can afford, ideally with cash to avoid interest. Use public transport, bike, walk, whenever possible.
And food. Cooking at home is almost always cheaper and usually healthier. Buying in bulk, packing your lunch, it adds up.
But the source also adds some nuance here. Consider the time trade-off. Is driving an hour round trip just to save $5 on groceries really worth it if that hour could have been spent earning more money through a side hustle? Maybe not.
Right. Ultimately, this isn't about deprivation, is it?
Not at all. It's about being radically honest with yourself about what truly brings you joy and value. Spend generously on that, and then ruthlessly cut spending on everything else, all the noise that doesn't actually align with your goal of freedom.
Now, none of these strategies work if they're just ideas on a page, right? The source really emphasizes that consistent execution is everything.
Yeah, building wealth isn't a one-time event. It's the result of daily habits stacked up over time. Consistency is king.
That suggestion of a daily 5-10-minute money habit sounds powerful.
It really is. Just checking accounts, looking for errors or unexpected fees, maybe just thinking for a minute about opportunities to make a bit more money. It keeps you engaged, makes managing money feel like an active game you're playing and getting better at, not a chore.
And regular monitoring builds on this. Weekly net worth tracking, a monthly review of your income sources, savings progress, and bills.
They even suggest paying bills manually instead of automating everything sometimes, just so you stay connected to where your money is actually going.
And quarterly, recalculate your number, maybe rebalance your investments if needed.
And never stop learning. Reading books like this one, listening to deep dives like this one, taking courses that knowledge compounds just like money does, opening up more opportunities. The source even mentions that paying an expert a few $100s for just 15 minutes of highly specialized advice can be incredibly cost-effective if it solves a specific problem or provides a critical insight.
Finally, the importance of relationships comes through too.
Yeah, building a community, whether it's online or offline, can lead to side hustle opportunities, networking, general support. Business, and often opportunities to accelerate your income, often boils down to relationships and trust.
Okay, so to recap the key shifts in thinking. First, question that standard 40-year retirement path. It's not the only way.
Right. Then, define your personal destination. Figure out your number. Relentlessly track your starting point, your net worth, and your debt situation.
Leverage the single biggest accelerator, maximizing your savings rate. That percentage is crucial.
And powerfully boost your income through optimizing your main job and building profitable side hustles. Don't just focus on cutting expenses.
Make your money work for you through smart, low-cost investing think index funds and strategically using real estate for appreciation and cash flow.
And finally, redefine spending. Understand the true cost of purchases in terms of your time and lost future freedom. Focus your savings efforts on the biggest expenses and only spend intentionally on what genuinely brings you value and joy.
Because the ultimate goal, as the book really emphasizes, isn't just accumulating a certain dollar amount. It's the freedom that number represents.
Exactly. It's the time, the space, the control, the ability to say no to things that drain you and yes to things that light you up. It's the ability to design a life you actually love and have the financial foundation to support it.
They share stories, don't they? People using their financial freedom to travel, pursue passions, spend more time with family.
Or like that example of Justin just being able to read a book in a hammock at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday because he chooses to, not because he has to work. That's freedom.
So let's leave you with this thought, something to really chew on after listening. Think about a purchase you've made recently. Take a moment later today and actually try to calculate its true cost, not just the dollars, but the hours it took you to earn that money. And, perhaps more importantly, the future value that money could have compounded into if you'd invested it.
So the question becomes, what is the biggest trade-off you are making right now with your spending? And when you look at that true cost, is that trade-off genuinely worth it to you?
This path to accelerated financial freedom, it's definitely a journey, not really a race, and your number will likely change along the way. The key is taking consistent action, being willing to question those old assumptions, and starting today, even with really small steps.